Hello ladies and gentlemen, Gapesy here. This is the Heroic Tank Guide for Thok the Bloodthirsty, and this video should assist tank players with the basics that you'll need to know to get through this fight on Heroic. So let's get started. So if you are a tank in charge of the jailer, which is very likely since tanks usually handle this job, then you'll want to know the cage order. And the cage order is pretty standard. Most raids will use the same order that we're using here. The first cage you open is the front left cage, which is the green cage. And then second is front right or blue. And then final cage is back right or red. The reason for this order is simply to allow your raid cooldowns to be used on the first normal phase as well as the third normal phase. They won't be up fast enough for you to use them every normal phase. But you want to extend the first one and the third one, or the first one where there isn't a cage open yet, and then the third normal phase where you just opened the second front right cage, which is blue. Those two phases will generally be extended longer with raid cooldowns, whereas the second normal phase, after you open the front left cage, and the final normal phase, the fourth one after you open the back right cage, are much shorter inherently. So you won't really need your raid cooldowns for that. You'll just end the phase faster. Also, when you open the cage as a tank, it's important to note the timing. If you're doing 5 total fixate targets per kite phase, which is what we're doing in the video here, and that's pretty standard for non-warlock setups, meaning you don't have warlock portals, then you want to open the cage that you're going to activate next right at the end of the 4th fixate. So just before he casts his 5th fixate on his 5th target, you open the cage. It takes about the same amount of time for the cage targets or cage NPCs to come out and the boss to end his phase as it does for an entire fixate, which is 12 seconds long. So if you open it right as the 4th one is ending, as he's going through his 5th and final fixate, as soon as that fixate is about to end, the phase will end as well, which is exactly what you want. It will position him properly at the back of the room. He'll come toward the NPCs. You'll be able to position him near the cage that you want him to be at, and all that good stuff. Now, the first addition on Heroic that isn't on the normal difficulty is a new type of ad called Captive Cave Bats. These will spawn in a group along the left side of the room shortly after you open the first cage, or the front left green cage. So there you can see the cave bats coming into the raid there. These have normal threat, so assuming you are not tanking the boss at the time, you'll need to pick up the cave bats and make sure they don't kill anyone else, since they're going to fly in kind of from up above, and they have a tendency to go toward healers and random raid members. So make sure you intercept them effectively if you're tanking them, and then put them in position that allows your DPS to kill them quickly. If you're 2 tanking this fight, your current tank is on the boss and you're picking up the ads, it's important that your raid figures out a position that you can stand that allows your DPS, particularly your melee DPS, to attack the bats. Because if you can't use melee DPS, it's going to take a lot longer for them to die. Beyond that positioning issue, once you get that figured out, the best thing you can do is to DPS the bats heavily. They won't do much damage to you as a tank. And watch for them to start shooting out vampiric bolts. These act just like the bats in the trash before the boss. So when you see them shooting out bolts, if you use an area of effect stun on the bats, it will interrupt their casting of the bolts, and this will greatly reduce the damage that your raid takes. But other than that, the goal is to get them gathered up all together, get them in position on your melee so that melee can kill them off quickly, and then once they're dead, then you kind of push the phase over and transition and all that good stuff. The second change on Heroic, or addition, is the Starved Yeti. And similar to the bats, this guy will spawn shortly after you open his appropriate cage, which is the second cage, or the front right one, which is blue. The Yeti will then appear and just start running across the room about every 15 seconds. There you can see him. He just ran past in the background. And again, this guy is just like the Yeti you saw in the trash before the boss. So he'll stun himself against a wall, and then after 10 or 15 seconds, target a random location on the opposite end of the wall, put a red marker there to show where he's going, and then charge across the room. As a tank, you won't really have to interact with the Yeti at all, but you don't want to get hit by him, just like any other raid member. So particularly if you are tanking the jailer during the kite phase and you're in the center of the room. It's really important that you don't let him run across you. As a tank, he probably won't one-shot you. In fact, I know he won't. But it's just, good practice not to get hit by him, and helps your healers out and all that stuff. So just watch the Yeti when he's about to charge, and he's looking across the room, figure out where he's going to go, and try not to be in his path there. Now, as a tank, one important thing to understand is the general positions for the normal phases. That is, just where you're tanking the boss, near one of the cages, and allowing your DPS to burn him down. So you can see here that we have a couple raid markers that we're utilizing. And this will be set up before the poll. The basic idea here is as you enter the room, if you look at the inner ring, that sort of 8-sided ring, you have corners in the front of the room, the front left and front right corner. If you use raid markers about 12 yards apart from one another on opposite sides of the front left and front right corners, so here we're using blue and green in the front left corners, this allows 2 raid positions to be set up pretty easily so that they can get healed from ground-based heal effects like Healing Rain and Efflorescence, but they're not in danger of getting too close together and pushing the phase before you're ready. Meanwhile, the tank then, as you can see on the left there, our Paladin tank, positions the boss so that his side is in line with the 2 markers. This allows only the tank at the time to get breathed on by the boss, but both markers are in melee range. It also sets up nicely for your kiting phases if you're doing the same patterns that we are and all that good stuff. So you have these 2 positions near the front left and front right respectively, and as those phases begin, you pull the boss into those positions, basically facing the cage with his side right up against the markers. You can get really close to those markers pretty much. And so here the kite phase begins, and the markers don't really matter. And then once the kite phase ends, you'll pull the boss back to the position in front of whatever cage it is that you need to activate next. So for the first 2 normal phases, you're going to pull him to the front left cage because at the start of the fight you haven't opened a cage yet. So you might as well start him in the front left near the blue and the green markers there that you can see. And then the second time after the first kite phase, you pull him back there again, just like you did the first time, because you're opening that front left cage after that kite phase. Or you already opened it, I should say. And then you go to the front right after the second kite phase. And then finally you go to the back right near the red cage after you open that one. And that's pretty much it. So it comes down to whether your raid uses the same general positions and kite transitions and all that stuff. But assuming you do, you pull it in front of the cage, sides to the markers near that cage, and it's pretty simple from there. The only thing to be particularly careful about as a tank is if you are tanking the boss after a kite phase ends, so that's always just your time to tank him. After the second kite phase ends and you're moving the boss to the front right cage, so you've opened the left cage already, you did the kite phase after that, and you're going to the front right cage this time, he's going to be quite far away after the NPCs come out, just because of how they work. So when you pull him to the front right position near the purple and red markers that you see on the right there, if you pull in front of that cage, he's going to be so far away that his breath endangers people that are positioned on the markers until you get him actually set up there near the cage. So you want to pull a little bit wide as you're moving into position there. Make sure, or mostly just think about the angle that you're facing the boss. You don't want people on the markers at red and purple that are preparing for the phase to get breathed on by the boss, because they'll probably die in addition to the other damage that's going on. So that's the only time he really gets way out of position. The other times after the cage is open, he's pretty much right next to the cage, and you don't have to move him very much, so it's much easier. So that is pretty much it for the positioning for tanking, and in terms of the boss and relative to your raid and all that stuff after the phases end. For the actual kite phases, you can see here that the jailer, again, this is based on if your raid uses the same kite method that we do here, which I'll assume that you are. The jailer is positioned here in the center, slightly off center really, so that when the kite phase begins, the boss kind of travels just beyond you, between the entrance of the room and you in the center where you are with the jailer. Keeping the jailer here allows, of course, your DPS to pretty much be in range of the boss while also being in range of the jailer. And it also allows your healers to stay near you in the center, keep you as a tank alive, as well as other raid members that are chasing the boss around. So it's a really effective position. You really won't have to move much at all, except once the jailer dies and the boss is coming back down for his final fixate. But by then, you or the other tank will have picked up the jailer key and gone over to open the cage anyway. So just keep the jailer in the center. You won't have to move very much when the boss is being kited, and you'll be in range of everything that you need to be in range of. So that about covers it for the Heroic Tank Guide for Thok the Bloodthirsty. For the most part, you, as a tank, will only need to worry about positioning the boss properly after kite phases end, and then doing your normal transitions for the breath stacks, depending on whether you're using 2 tanks or just 1. I'm going to assume you're going to use 2. One tanking is much more difficult when you're learning this fight, in my opinion. And then just pick up the cave bats after the first cage is opened, if you're assigned to do so. Make sure you have proper positions for them so that DPS can kill them quickly. Use your stuns when they start to do their vampiric bolt attack. And everything else is basically the same as it is on normal difficulty. So, as always, good luck, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed, please subscribe.